Growth Council meeting. This is like a huge chamber, but thank you very much to the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors for letting us use this very nice room while Cal EPA's conference room is being renovated. Okay, why don't we start with a roll call. Jenny, we'll start with you.
Yes, Jenny Lester-Moffat here for Karen Ross, Secretary.
Alexis Podesta, the Secretary of Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency.
Bob Fisher, Public Member.
Ken Alex, Director of OPR.
Jana Olson Morgan on behalf of Mike Wilkening for California Health and Human Services Agency.
Matt Rodriguez, Cal EPA.
Manuel Pastor, Public Member.
Brian Cash, here representing John Laird from the Natural Resources Agency.
Great. Welcome, everybody. If you have comments to make for any of the matters or general public matter, please fill out a card and bring it up to our folks in the front. And otherwise, let's move on to approval of the minutes. Do I hear a motion on adopting the minutes from the last meeting?
I'll move.
Move. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are unanimously adopted. And now let's turn to council member updates. Anyone have an update?
I'd like to just give a quick update on the Homeless Coordinating and Financing Council. So most people are aware that the governor signed the budget at the end of last month, June 27th, and part of that included moving the Homeless Coordinating and Financing Council from HCD to Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. And it also created a new homeless emergency aid program, which is designed to be a one-time $500 million block grant to support local jurisdictions to tackle immediate homeless issues. So we're about 1 month in, and we have made some pretty significant headway, I'd say, for state government. So our first council meeting was held July 11th to adopt this new structure. We've hired an executive officer and a grant team lead, and they are officially at work. We've also hired a council specialist, a local government liaison, and a research program specialist, and they're lined up to start work next week and the week after. Our new website is live on the agency's website. We're on track to send our first communication to our stakeholders, which include the continuums of care in the cities with populations over 330,000 folks by next Friday. And we're on track to open up our notice of funding availability by mid-September. We've been busy.
Thank you. Any other council updates? All right. Let's see. On to the consent calendar. Louise, or you want to talk us through that?
Sure. So this is an item to approve expenditure of some reimbursed Proposition 84 grant dollars. So we have approximately $1.15 million of funds that have been reimbursed. We would like to use 800,000 of those to support planning grants for the Transformative Climate Communities program, and then 350,000 for planning activities, to which we would return to the council to discuss. And so, but the $800,000 will be discussed in the TCC guidelines, which are a later agenda item.
Okay. Do we have a motion on the consent calendar for adoption?
I'll move the adoption of the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimously adopted. Thank you. And let me note that Kate White is here on behalf of the CalSTA agency, Transportation Agency.
Thank you.
Okay, Louise, over to you for the Executive Director's report. And welcome as Executive Director.
Thank you. Does that work? Okay. So just going to provide a few updates. So I'll go through California Climate Investment Program's funding guidelines, the just final budget numbers, which I think were adopted before the one day ahead of the last council meeting, and then some HIAP related updates at the end.
1 second. These are the okay.
Okay.
Oh, mine's not on.
Oh. So CARB updated its funding guidelines for agencies that implement and administer California climate investment programs last week at their board meeting. These new guidelines reflect new legislative direction and priority investment areas, including some that we implement around research, and also a significant amount of public input and consultation. So one element that is brought up in these guidelines is around reporting of employment benefits from investment areas, which will have which our programs have a large impact on. So this is just a topic I wanted to flag for the council that we'll be continuing to work with ARB, HCD, and others to really come up with the guidelines for how we're going to quantify and account for these employment benefits. So the next is just with our budget. As I said, it was adopted just before the last council meeting, so I just wanted to confirm the figures, which I think we touched on. One is the continuous appropriation, of which $5 million is for technical assistance. That was approved at the last council meeting. We have $18 million for the climate change research program. Really, in this next round of that program, we'll be focusing on one of the priority investment areas that we did not focus on in round one, and that is around technology demonstration and deployment. We have $40 million for transformative climate communities, and then an additional $2 million for technical assistance, with at least $1 million of that being directed toward technical assistance associated with the Institute for Local Government's Beacon program, and we're working with them on what that relationship will look like. So next, moving on to HIAP, and in your binder there is an action report on the active transportation plan, and included really just to highlight a number of the accomplishments that have happened to date, including the establishment of a state employee bicycle commuter benefit, and some other actions around increasing access to active transportation. DMV has updated their driver handbook with ways to support safe and active transportation. And the CTC, the California Transportation Commission, and Caltrans have developed an appendix in the Regional Transportation Plan guidelines with information on how to promote health through walking, biking, and the use of public transit. Caltrans is also participating in the HIAP Government Alliance on Race and Equity Capital Cohort pilot. So there's a lot of great accomplishments, areas for future work. So nice to review it and just see some of the real tangible actions that are coming out of the collaboration and the HIAP task force overall. Next. So next, just a quick update on the Governing for Racial Equity Capital Cohort, or GARE. There's a new report that has been produced and is publicly available on our website, on the SGC website. And a graduate student researcher has looked at pay gaps across racial, ethnic, and gender subgroups across California, across state government. These findings were presented to the GARE cohort in July. As I said, the report is available on our website, and the data code and data dictionary are available for departments who want to look deeper into their own and do analysis on their own department. So all of the State Department teams have a work plan template and are beginning to draft action plans for their departments. And on August 15th, teams will convene for a Train the Trainer workshop, which will build their skills to deliver and facilitate racial equity presentations and communications for colleagues within their department. And then I just wanted to close, actually, just to talk through SGC as with the Office of Planning and Research participating in the GARE Capital Cohort. And just to give a sense of what we're doing, to give it a little, to give a sense of what it looks like when it's being implemented, we have 10 staff participating across policy, communication, and human relations. To date, we've completed an organizational assessment that's just looking at our organization's commitments and actions on racial equity. We've drafted a racial equity narrative, which looks at what our vision and goals are, but also what is the role of SGC and OPR in promoting racial equity. We've done a deep dive looking at our grant programs and how race and equity are reflected in those, and also looked at our hiring and career pipelines in terms of thinking about how our staff reflects the communities that we serve. So to date, we have a few things we've done. We've removed racial data from job applications. We are looking at how to increase competitiveness for home ownership projects in the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program, recognizing that home ownership is an important wealth building opportunity. And we're also looking into trying to develop internships that target community colleges and other populations. Some of our next steps are really to continue implementing racial equity measures in our programs, in our contracts, and in our hiring, and then developing our racial equity action plan, which will set a vision, metrics and goals, and actions for SGC across all of our work areas, so human relations, our programs, our communications, and that will be drafted this winter. And so those are all of the updates that I have.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, Bob?
I have a couple questions. If we could go back to the first slide. Next, yeah.
Yes.
How do you see this adoption of these new guidelines affecting our programs? And do you have a sense yet on what it's going to, where the big changes may be?
Well, I think, our programs represent a large portion of the investments and are really important job, especially I think our focus has been a lot on the employment generation and how we capture jobs that are produced both in constructing our projects, but also over the long term, and trying to come up with mechanisms that are not or not overly burdensome for our grantees and others. And so I think we're looking right now at what the approaches could be for doing that, and sitting down with ARB to think through, where can we take advantage of avenues where reporting is already happening, potentially because of other funding sources, but also what are ways that we can capture some of these benefits. We already do some modeled analysis to estimate jobs, and so starting from there.
And the other question. The other question was on the report regarding racial and pay equity. Mm-hmm. What were the just general overall findings of that report in terms of the pay within government, state government? Have you had a chance to read that yet or not?
Chance to read it, but I could look to my high-up colleagues. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Is that? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Julia Kaplan, the lead for the Health and All Policies program. I don't have the report in front of me, but the general findings are that there are definite disparities in pay by race, by gender. There are certain groups that have, but when you look by race, there's certain groups that have higher pay than others. Some of that has to do with job classifications. Some of that has to do with the types of jobs. There were some interesting findings around differences in terms of which kinds of job classifications people who have different race or gender backgrounds, identities are in. There were also some limitations that were found based on the data where it was not possible to look at differences within job classifications. And so we've been having conversations with the Department of Human Resources and the Government Operations Agency around strategies to kind of improve and expand upon the data collection and reporting systems so that we're able to do those analyses. And some of that analyses can be done within departments. And there were some interesting findings around kind of differences that happen between people who are full-time paid, full-time salaried employees, people at different levels in terms of management, supervisory, executive positions, and also temporary positions, which short-term temporary positions can sometimes be very low level and other times can be kind of high-level consulting roles. So, and we're happy to share a link to the report.
Could you talk for a second about how that report might impact the work that we do on this council?
Let's see, that's a great question. I think it could probably impact a lot of things in terms of what we do. Just kind of thinking off the cuff here, I mean, the reason that we asked for this report to be done at this time is because we have 18 departments going through the Government Alliance for Race and Equity training program this year, and it was useful for those departments to have an understanding of what's happening, you know, across government, and also really, and I think that the Strategic Growth Council is in a really interesting position in terms of working across government and doing coordination between agencies, where we have an opportunity to not just support individual departments to do racial equity work, but to really think about how to do this as an enterprise-wide approach. I also think that there are clear links between this work and what has been happening for several years around equity in grant making. And the Strategic Growth Council has been, you know, one of several early adopters in state government, I would say, who are really bringing an equity lens into grant making. There are many departments that have had that mission for a long time, but I think SGC, particularly bringing the health and equity piece together, you know, has done a lot to test new approaches, and I think those go hand in hand. You're welcome. Thanks.
Other questions or comments?
Julia, do you want to stay for a second?
I'm out of here.
It's more of a comment, but I just wanted to recognize Julia and her team with the Health and On Policy Task Force, and how it was mentioned that the Active Transportation Action Plan that has really been put together by HIAP and been worked on for many years, even predating me at CalSTA. And it's just been a really, I think, a key strategy, having these multiple agencies beyond transportation. We always think of active transportation as a transportation solution, and then there's the zero carbon environmental perspective, but to have the health perspective added, and a lot of different departments working together to advance walking and biking in California, I think it's made a huge difference. It was mentioned the driver's handbook is one example. That wouldn't have, now the green lanes that you see, the green bike lanes that you see on the road are in the driver's handbook. So that's just one example of something that just really wouldn't have happened, I think, without HIAP's leadership, involvement, and engaging many different departments, including some of our departments like DMV. Thank you.
Okay, so we have public comment on this item. Kimberly Chen.
Kimberly Chen with the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network. I also wanted to recognize the work of the Health and All Policies Task Force, particularly around active transportation, echoing the comments that were just made. CPAN was one of the initial co-sponsors of the bill that asked the RTP to include a health and equity index, and I can say without a doubt, having worked on that project, it would not have come together had it not been for the collaboration that HIAP and CDPH helped bring together. So I really want to commend that work. It really, you know, it was, if for not that expertise, I don't think it would have been as robust and as useful for, all the agencies around the state to look at. And we're also very excited to see the work that HIAP is bringing together on GARE and looking forward to that implementation as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that, let's turn it over to HIAP. Leanne, you're up on.
Doing research first.
Oh, we're doing research first. Okay, darn. I thought it was much more. Okay. Number 7, climate change research program, and Louise, you're doing it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not taking over, but Liz Grassi, who is going to do this today, is on jury duty and is, I think, in deliberations today. So I will present our recommended awards for the climate change research program. So we're recommending that the council approve the staff recommendation of awarding $10,500,002 in cap and trade funding for the 2017-18 climate change research program to fund 10 research projects that facilitate greenhouse gas emission reductions, address benefits to disadvantaged and low-income communities, and focus on clean energy adaptation and resiliency. So just to remind everyone, the Climate Change Research Program was a $10.5 million competitive grant program funded through the California Climate Investments Program. And the research focused on reducing carbon emissions with an emphasis on California, and could include clean energy adaptation and resiliency. Eligible institutions included the University of California, California State University, federally funded national labs, and private colleges and universities in California. So we had 4 research investment areas that were included in this round of funding that were identified in our research investment plan. The first was supporting and protecting vulnerable communities from the impacts of climate change. The second was accelerating and supporting transitions to climate-smart communities. The third was integrating land use, conservation, and management into California climate change programs. And the fourth was increasing data accessibility and planning support for state, local, and regional climate change planning. I think we touched on this at the last meeting, but just to give a sense, it was a very popular program. We received 69 proposals totaling about $87 million in grant requests. 48 of those were project grants. These were $1 million or less to focus on a specific research topic. 21 were partnership grants that were larger, over $1 million, collaborative in larger scope projects. Got a nice mix of applications, especially from CSU and the University of California. Of the 69 proposals that were submitted, 32 advanced past the first round of review, and I'll walk through quickly what the review process was, and so still totaled well over the amount of funding available. And so we had that was about $44 million advanced past phase 1 of review. So phase 1 of the review process was a merit review that looked at the scientific merits of the program, but then also I think was really focused on meaningful engagement. And this was an element that we tried to provide really meaningful criteria for. And so for the reviewers, there were 40 reviewers in phase 1. There were 20 state employees that had advanced degrees that conducted a scientific merit review on the 48 project grant proposals. We had 12 state employees with expertise in engagement and outreach conduct meaningful engagement reviews on the 48 project grant proposals. And then we had an 8-member advisory committee that was made up of experts, external experts, that did a full merit review, both the scientific merit and engagement on the partnership grant proposals, the 21 that were submitted, and then worked with the state review team on the project grant proposals and the recommendations that came from that group. The second phase of review was a programmatic review, really looking at the project management capacity, but then also looking across the advanced proposals, so the still about $48 million in requested projects, to look at how they align with state policy and research priorities and the criteria and priorities of the research investment plan. We had a 9-member interagency review committee that reviewed all 32 of the advanced proposals and chose a suite of research projects, which is what we are presenting here today to you all. So the first, we are recommending 3 partnership grants for funding. The first of which would go to the University of California at Davis for the Climate Smart Communities Consortium. The second to San Diego State University for an integrated land use planning project looking at using an ecosystem-based approach for planning in Southern California. And the third would go to the University of California at Los Angeles to look at measuring the impacts of climate change on vulnerable communities to help design and target protective policies. Given the amount of funding that was available and the scope and scale of these projects, we've worked with the lead investigators and are recommending that we fund these projects at 65% of the requested amount. We're working to ensure that we achieve similar goals and intentions with the research, but it's scaled appropriately to match that reduction in budget. And that could be from a scope or a phasing shift in how the projects are carried out. Next, we're recommending 7 project grants for for funding. And these would all be funded at the full amount requested because these are more focused projects. They are not as easy to shift the phasing or scaling or scoping of them. These projects include one to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, looking at the future of agriculture in the San Joaquin Valley, considering groundwater management and climate change considerations. One to Lawrence Berkeley National Lab for building a toolkit for heat resiliency in vulnerable environments. 3 to the University of California at Berkeley, 1 to look at the interaction of sea level rise, hazardous sites, and environmental justice in California. The second, to increase data accessibility and climate resilience planning support through expanding the use of expanding the capacity of CalAdapt, a data tool that the state is invested in to provide climate information. And then the third, to look at the unintended effects of climate change mitigation by the development of a tool to predict investment-related displacement in communities. Then one award is recommended for the University of California at Los Angeles to look at coupling community knowledge and large data tools to facilitate equitable energy transitions. And finally, the third one is a regionally focused project for UC Santa Cruz, looking at integrating land use and climate change on California's central coast and looking at how impacts and adaptations for local communities. In addition, there is a nice summary of each of these projects provided in the binder, which gives a lot more information on the intended approach, the partners. All of these projects and partnership grants have a great list of collaborations, and those partnerships include across other research institutions, but also with community-based organizations and others. And so those are the 10 projects we're recommending for funding. As we look ahead, as I mentioned, we have $18 million of funding available for the upcoming fiscal year. We will be, the investments in this round will emphasize priorities that we did not fund in round 1, and in particular, the low greenhouse gas transformative technology demonstration and deployment category that was called out in the research investment plan. And we are working already, getting underway with outreach and research, developing a solicitation for that over the late summer and fall. And so with that, again, we recommend that the council approve the staff recommendation for awarding the $10,500,002.
Thank you. Questions for Louise on this? All right. Yeah, Bob.
To what degree do we look at the implementation of this research in judging either to do a project or the number of dollars that are going towards a project?
It was a large criteria. Was one of our main goals was that the research be very outcome oriented, and so all of the proposals do link directly to an outcome. Some of those are, very locally based types of projects, and others are looking at a tool that can be scaled up or rolled out. And so it was a large area of focus for the review committee. We had some excellent proposals that fell much more, in a different phase in the research process and really didn't have that outcome piece. And that was definitely scored lower than ones where you could see that implementation connection.
Great. I mean, I think that's really important. And to what degree are the dollars committed? Did they relate in any way to the potential impact that a project has, or are they more tied to the request and essentially the number of hours that are required to get the research done?
It's more tied to the request, and just that some types of research cost more to do than others. And so, if you've got a lot of focus group activity or survey activity or something that might just have a larger cost associated with it. So the costs are more related to the specific activities that are funded.
Manuel?
So this is but one question and one comment. I think the question is that $2. Anyway.
We'll send a hat around after.
Yeah. So as the professor on the panel and someone who's done a lot of research in this field, particularly climate justice, this is a superb group of proposals that are being funded with some of the top researchers in the state. The partners are people who are genuine, authentic partners in the field, particularly on several of these grants. I can't imagine what you left on the cutting room floor. It must have been some very good stuff, because this is a very strong set of proposals.
Thanks.
Matt, you want to?
Could we go back to the previous slide? So looking ahead, you weren't asking us to also vote on the priorities for the next round. Okay, that will come. So what will be the process for the next round?
Well, we have the research investment plan that we passed, so that will continue. We'll develop a new set of guidelines and a request for proposals that we'll come back to the council with for that. And there will be some outreach. Again, we did pretty significant outreach leading into this research investment plan, but we'll do more. But we have the priority right now that has been communicated to us is around really trying to focus on this transformative technology piece. And so that will entail reaching out to additional partners, I think, to think about what that could look like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Brian.
Do you know when that criteria will be coming back to the board?
I believe it will be September is our next council.
So before November?
September.
Yes, September.
Yes, okay.
All right, I'll try again.
I just have one
Jenny.
quick comment. Sorry about that. But I know she's not here, so I'll send her a follow-up note. But just to acknowledge Liz and the work that she has done. Our staff had served on some of the review committees, and it's certainly been a heroic task, to say the least. They are very good applicants, all of them, and all of the different, both the technical and the outreach review, all of that has been superb in the way she's handled it. So I'll send her a note as well, but I just wanted to recognize her publicly as well.
No, I think there's a lot of work done on the fly to expand our review capacity when we saw the magnitude of applications coming in. So yes, Liz did an amazing job.
And I want to also thank the scientific advisory panel. I went and saw them, and the couple of days they were locked in a room kind of going through all these applications. It was very serious in there.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now, I would entertain a motion on the staff proposal.
I move we accept the recommendation and fund these proposals.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
And we have a second. All right. So we have a few public comments on this. All right. So first speaker is Dan Sperling, followed by Richard E.T. Sandowski, looks like.
Thank you very much. I am Dan Sperling. I'm a professor at UC Davis. I'm director of our Institute of Transportation Studies at UC Davis. and I happen to be the lead investigator for the project that was at the top of the list you just saw on transportation and communities. And so I just note that we had, as an illustration of the partnerships, we have 5 UC campuses involved in it, as well as USC and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, along with many community groups that are full partners in this project. So I did want to thank you all and thank the staff especially for the award, for the program that exists, for your vision in championing the role of research. So I did want to make 2 points, and that I hope you'll keep in mind when you consider future research initiatives going forward. One is, and this is a little bit parochial, but transportation does account for just about half of all the greenhouse gases in California. It's about 40% direct emissions and about 5 to 8% emissions from producing the gasoline and diesel. So it's close to half of all the emissions are connected with transportation. So transportation is central to any initiative to solve climate change, to solve air pollution, to improve social equity, to improve our economy. And I do also want to point out going forward that we should all keep in mind that extraordinary changes are about to sweep through the transportation sector with electric vehicles, automated vehicles, shared mobility. And the effect of all this could be negative or could be very beneficial. And I would just point out that California has an opportunity. And in this case, I'm talking to many of you there that are representing other agencies as well, because this is something of great importance to the state, or should be. Because California has an opportunity to be a leader in directing these revolutions towards the public interest, to building links to communities, to create a transportation system that dramatically lowers the cost of transportation to consumers and to government, that reduces environmental impacts, that greatly increases accessibility for those who are old, young, have physical disabilities, or unable to afford reliable cars. So that's the first point. The second one has to do with universities. And I want to emphasize again the importance of tapping the expertise in the universities. And it requires a lot of work for us to, a lot of coordination for governments to work with universities and vice versa, to work with community groups, heck, even for us university people to work with each other. And so I just want you to keep in mind going forward, and this goes way beyond transportation, I'm speaking more broadly. We have the best universities in the world here in the state of California. So I urge us all, and I'm talking to myself as well as all of you, to do a much better job of tapping into that expertise. We can do much better. And many of you know that I also serve on the board of the Air Resources Board. And so I've seen firsthand both the need and the opportunity to tap university expertise, and really a poor job that we're all doing. And both sides are responsible for that. So I do want to praise you for doing this program, for including many universities into it. We, myself and our partners, we look forward to working very closely with the SGC going forward to deliver our proposed research, our engagement plan, to be truly outcome-oriented. And I want to emphasize that we in the university, we get labeled as just like to sit in our labs and write papers, but that's not true. We want to have an impact. We want to contribute. We want to have do outcome-oriented research. We want to engage, but we in the university community don't have the right incentive system. Government is often reluctant to work with universities in different kinds of ways. So I'm here to say that this is a great thing, that we, in our case at least, will leverage those funds and the great expertise at our institutions to assist the people of the state. And I would point out that what we do here is really important for the state, for the people of California, but it has value and impact way beyond California because we are leaders in so much of what we're talking about here, from active transportation all the way through all these other topics. So we should take that as a special responsibility. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Richard, followed by, I'm going to mash this, but looks like Hugvet Albrecht.
Hi, Richard Sadowski.
So Richard, you've identified you want to talk on the next 4 topics. I don't know if you want to take a little extra time and cover them all now, or if you want to come up for each one.
I kind of separated it, so
Okay.
I won't be very long. Okay,
All right.
yeah, sorry. Okay.
Fire away.
I just, first of all, very encouraged, and I love the diversity of the universities that are all involved in California on this issue. I'd like to kind of just maybe look forward on the post round 1, and as we put the maybe the shovel in the ground sort of things with regards to climate change, we have to make sure that like in our community in Morro Bay, they're doing a managed retreat of a critical infrastructure right now, but are failing to look at the whole picture of greenhouse gases with regards to energy uses and everything else, and public health and safety with regards to the critical infrastructure. So it's kind of a balance between critical infrastructure safeguarding and managed retreat. I think that we could learn a lot from the wastewater resiliency plan that New York City had done after post Hurricane Sandy in their programs, and kind of balancing that. And also, it would be really good when these projects go forward and hit the ground. I think it's imperative that we have state oversight on these projects with regards to any kind of building or anything else, because I think that sometimes the local government can be subject to being taken advantage by opportunists who are just trying to make money off the climate change and kind of logo. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I hesitate to even say your name again, but followed by Hannah Krieger.
Hugvet Albrecht, UCLA. The climate research program is a great program, but I have something technical. For the next round of submission, will you use the DWR portal?
I think it remains to be seen.
Because there were some issues with it.
We would love to hear more about
So
your
there were some
experience.
confidentiality issues. So people who submitted, investigators submitting, could see the proposals of other people submitting.
Can you stand a little closer to the microphone?
And should I repeat what I said? Should I repeat?
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. So people who submitted, investigators who submitted proposals could access, could see the materials of others. And that's usually, when it's awarded, it's no big deal because but before award, when you submit, you shouldn't be able to see what your competitors submit. And I think,
Yeah, I was not aware of that. So
okay,
we'll
I
look into
thought
that.
the UCLA sponsored program had said something about it, but yeah. So I just would like to, if that
Okay.
could be fixed, I think in
Yes.
the future that'd be good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hannah Krieger, followed by Gracia Lenas.
Good afternoon. My name is Hannah Krieger, and I work on the environmental equity team at the Greenlining Institute. Greenlining has been advocating for racial equity and economic justice for 25 years in California. I'm here today to comment in support of awarding research grants to the following proposals. First, the Climate Smart Consortium proposal led by UC Davis. Second, the Measuring the Impacts of Climate Change on Vulnerable Communities to Design and Target Protective Policies proposal led by UCLA. And third, the Increasing Data Accessibility and Climate Resiliency Planning Support through CalAdapt proposal led by UC Berkeley. Greenlining especially supports awarding these 3 research grants because of their focus on disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. In transportation, what we know is that there are very real and well-documented racial disparities in terms of who are the typical winners and losers of transportation investments. Black and brown communities, time and again, are hit hardest by transportation-related pollution, do not have access to sufficient mobility options, and experience longer and more costly commutes, which limits their economic opportunities. In climate, we know that low-income communities of color suffer first and worst from climate change, and there is a huge need for data and tools to assess these impacts and to develop strategies for community resilience and adaptation. These research proposals have a great potential to produce these equitable outcomes in the transportation sector and in climate resilience and adaptation. And the Green Lining Institute strongly supports the decision to fund these research proposals. Thank you all for your support.
Thank you. Gracia, followed by Jim Howley.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Gracia Lanes. I'm with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, and my comment is just going to be relatively brief today, just really echoing Dr. Pastor's comment about, the superb applications that were awarded this afternoon. We're really excited. We're particularly excited about one of the awards granted to UC Berkeley as they're looking to create a tool that will essentially look at potential displacements as you see these large investments happening in that community. We're one of the groups that's going to be working with the professor, and we're really looking forward to, so again, just really wanting to thank you all and SDC staff for recommending and granting those awards. So thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you. Jim Hawley at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. We just want to thank you for your support of this program, for keeping California and its role in keeping California on the cutting edge and the leadership on climate change mitigation and adaptation. And I really want to also join Dan in thanking and commending the staff for putting together this program. I'm sure it took a lot of work. It was done quickly but very thoughtfully. And I would say with a great outreach effort to researchers and communities alike. And I think the way you set this up really drew those two communities together in what I think will be a very positive way. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second, so any comment from council members? All right. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous pass of the resolutions with the staff recommendation. Thank you very much and congratulations. Okay, finally we get to health and all policies. Leanne.
I'm sorry to make you wait. Good afternoon, Chair Alex and Council. My name is Leanne Dillon, Deputy Program Director for the Health and All Policies team at the Strategic Growth Council. On behalf of the task force, it's my pleasure to share with you our newest action plan on parks and healthy tree canopy. Today, we're recommending the Council endorse the 2018-2020 Task Force Action Plan to promote parks and healthy tree canopy. Early in its formation, the task force established an aspirational goal that every California resident has access to places to be active, including parks, green space, and healthy tree canopy. From 2011 to 2015, the task force implemented a previously developed action plan in support of this goal. The plan before you today engages more sectors and partners, includes a longer list of state agency commitments in support of this goal, and leverages the task force's mandate related to equity to engage departments across all sectors in understanding how to reach priority communities. So let me say a little bit more about the action plan, and then I'll be inviting up some task force members to share a little bit with you the value they see in this work and some early progress. The previous slide. Yeah, thank you so much. Development of this plan was co-staffed between the Growth Council and the Department of Public Health, and so I want to say a special thank you to my partner in this work, Dahir Nasser from the Department of Public Health, for his leadership on this. The action plan was developed over an 18-month period through an in-depth collaborative process. Participation and input from 15 different state agencies, as well as numerous stakeholders from outside of state government, really drove the process. Together, they co-developed the action plan goal, which you see before you. And in that process, it was clear kind of a number of themes emerged. So one was an interest in specifying that the task force's activities in this area should focus on priority communities. They define that as having low access to parks, tree canopy, and open space, and burdened by poverty, economic hardship, and health inequities. This definition worked for the group because they each separately have specific populations, communities, and issue areas that they are focusing on, and this definition kind of cuts across all of those, bringing together their collective interest in focusing resources in areas most in need. Another theme that emerged was the need to elevate parks and tree canopy as essential community infrastructure that communities can't thrive without. Next slide. 3 objectives are included in the plan. Activities in Objective 1 leverage the interests and priorities of the State Parks Department and support including considerations of climate change adaptation and park planning, engaging with nutrition education practitioners in local parks, communicating about the role of parks as essential to public health, and increasing programming in parks, including art-focused programming. Activities in the second objective center on exploring what could be possible by engaging local educational agencies and public K-12 schools specifically as public land and infrastructure across the state that could be used as park space and grounds for supporting urban tree canopy. Additionally, Objective 2 includes an activity supportive of urban forestry workforce development. Objective 3 on data integration emerged as a key place health and all policies could add value. In the process to develop the plan, it emerged that a number of state entities were capturing, tracking, analyzing, in some cases, similar data, and in some cases, complementary data, and then in some cases, data that would be useful for them to share. And so data sharing has already been a valuable outcome of the task force's work in this area and will kind of continue to be a common thread in implementation. Next slide. So now I want to invite up a few of our key Health and All Policies Task Force members that really hold the vision for this work. And I want to both commend each of them for their creativity and their interest in engaging in these discussions and thinking about their work in different ways, and also have them come up and share with you some of the early progress that they're seeing. So first I'll have Jean Locker and Victor Patino with State Parks come up and say a few words.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jean Locker. I'm Chief of the Office of Grants and Local Services at California State Parks. And I just want to give a big thank you to our partners at the Health and All Policies Task Force. They've been tremendous in their support and their networking assistance as we have been developing our 2020 SCORP, which is a statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. And Victor's going to share a few details of what that support has looked like in recent months.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Our division is the Division of External Affairs, and we work closely with over 600 local park agencies consisting of cities, counties, and special park districts. And we've conducted over 30 focus groups with park directors, university members, as well as the general public, looking for a theme for the 2020 SCORP. And through the Health and All Policies Action Task Force work, along with our focus groups, we've identified health as a core theme for the 2020 statewide outdoor recreation plan. And I think the local park directors are very excited about health being a key focus because it gives a higher purpose for the purpose of providing parks and recreation. I think we all recognize that local parks, especially close to home parks, can be an ideal setting for physical activity, especially if there are sports fields, sports courts, outdoor gym equipment, running and jogging pathways and tracks to increase physical activity. But also what we heard from the general public through our focus groups is that there is a need for more programs in parks which will help make parks safer and increase activity. So one of the action items that we are excited about through HIAP is action item 1B on page 4, which is to fund a pilot program with the California Department of Public Health to increase physical activity in at least 3 unprogrammed parks using SNAP-Ed funding. And then we're also adding planning grant funding from National Park Service to pay for the research. So we've already identified 3 jurisdictions that would be part of that pilot program. And we were able to coordinate the local park directors with local health agencies to build a partnership at the local level. So this will be a great model to look forward to in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Robert Little will be up next with the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, the state's urban forester.
I'm surprised I let you be here.
Yeah, there's only 2 of us left in Sacramento. Strategic Growth Council members, my name is Robert Little. I'm the Urban and Community Forest Program Manager. I succeed John Melvin, who you've probably seen up here before. CAL FIRE supports the Parks and Healthy Tree Canopy Action Plan and our involvement with the task force because it aligns with our overall community and urban forest program direction. Working with the task force allows our department to network with numerous departments and agencies to promote and implement basic goals within our own strategic plan that we have for our urban forest program. Some of the items where we have strong alignment with our own plan, increased public awareness of some of the more intangible benefits that urban forests provide, namely health benefits of trees in the urban setting and environmental benefits of trees in the urban setting. Second is to stimulate the thought processes of local decision makers, elected officials, and policymakers to recognize urban and community forests as critical infrastructure and to adequately fund management of these forest resources. Specific to objective number 2 of the action plan, CAL FIRE, we recognize the significant challenges that lie ahead to increase urban tree canopy and vegetation in priority communities by 10%. You'll be pleased to know we're already working with various partners in these communities to meet this challenge through our previous year's grant programs that are already in effect through the CCI grant program. That being said, we also recognize the value of having a wider range of communities available to implement our grant programs. Under the guidance of Assembly Bill 1550, our ability to increase urban canopy and meet the objectives of the task force is strengthened. We support the action plan to function as a living document, and we are already working towards achieving specific deliverables and outcomes under these 3 objectives. Most of where we provide support is under objective 2, and a couple of the things that we're already doing is we're targeting K through 12 schools for planting sites. That's already happening. Inventory and mapping work is being done indirectly in these school sites. We're also developing workforce opportunities in urban forestry and arboriculture across the state. And we also have several grants that deal with education and outreach programs, namely alignment with UC Davis and Project Learning Tree and 4-H. Lastly, the overarching 5 key elements to ensure success of health in all policy efforts are really closely aligned with the California Urban Forestry Act, including the amendments that were made under Assembly Bill 1530. And this really underscores our support of the Parks and Healthy Tree Canopy Action Plan. Thank you for your time.
A couple of quick comments first. Thank you for the incredible work of your department in this sort of horrific time of fire. But I also want to make the point that you just made, that CAL FIRE does many other things, and part of it is urban forestry and education. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. We always remind people we're the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, so
Yeah,
sometimes
exactly.
that's lost on people. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Last, I'll have Matt Hennigan, Deputy Secretary for Sustainability with the Government Operations Agency, come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Leanne. Matt Hennigan, Deputy Secretary for Sustainability at Government Operations Agency. Pleased to be here and pleased to participate in the Healthy Tree Canopy and Parks Plan. The way that government operations can contribute to this plan is through our agency's DGS, which includes the Building Standards Commission and Division of State Architect. Everyone I've spoken to about this plan has been extremely animated and excited about it because we see in our everyday lives the value that trees bring. It enables active transportation when it's too hot to walk or bike otherwise, clean air, rainwater infiltration, a number of sustainability benefits that are in alignment with our broader statewide goals. We also have goals in the forest carbon plan to increase tree canopy by 10%. As well as making green infrastructure solutions more common rather than exceptional throughout the state. So I see this plan as a way to further the goals that are already established by the state. One way that cities have been doing that is by passing local ordinances that say new parking lots and new buildings have to have a minimum shade tree canopy requirement. Folsom and Sacramento both have 50% requirement after 10 years of tree growth. 50% of the shade of the parking lot area has to be shaded. But we don't have a statewide standard for that, and schools specifically are exempt from those local requirements because Division of State Architect serves as their building official, not the local government's building official. So schools were a logical place to start for a number of reasons. Number one, to get rid of that loophole. And number two, because children are uniquely vulnerable to heat island effect and air pollution and the problems associated with a lack of urban tree canopy. Our partners at Division of State Architect have been extremely responsive and drafted draft code amendment to require a minimum shade canopy at new school sites. And while that is limited to schools, getting that language through the code making process and into the Cal Green Building Code sets a precedent, and that language can then be brought into other building types in subsequent code cycles. So we didn't wait for official adoption of this plan to start working on it, and there really is no reason to wait because tree canopy is such a no regrets solution for sustainability, energy reduction, and also climate adaptation that I'm happy that GovOps, DSA, and Building Standards Commission could jump right into this work. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think the next slide just reiterates the recommended action, and I'm happy to take questions.
Questions or comments from the council?
Can I comment?
You may.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. So really, I just wanted to echo what Kate said earlier so eloquently. I think this is a tremendous cross-sectional work that you've produced, and I really want to laud and express my gratitude to both the HIAP staff, but also your task force members. I think that this is another excellent example of the way that we can work together, break down some of those governmental silos, and really see those areas of shared interest and really make very positive, concrete change. So thank you.
Okay, so we have a recommended action. Do I hear a motion on that recommendation?
I so move.
Hear a second? Okay, motion, then second. We have one comment on this item. Mr. Sandowski.
Hi, Richard Sadowski. I love the project, but I'm just going to speak on one of your aspiration goals about healthy housing and indoor space and affordable housing. Maybe in the future when we look at, when HIAP looks at different projects with regards to climate change, and it kind of overlaps with what we talked about earlier with transportation, is maybe there could be a system. In Morro Bay, we're a disadvantaged community. However, we're a coastal community. But I think that we have enough local contractors and stuff that maybe if during big public projects or public climate change projects, we could integrate maybe a bidding process that maybe gives an advantage to a local contractor that can hire local workers. And then right now I sit on the Morro Bay Planning Commission, and then recently we went to a planning 3-day symposium, and one of the things that was kind of a disconnect is that, you know, we're pushing this high density, but we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support that high density, and maybe have tiny homes, but, you know, go more of a, you know, gray water systems in green. We need to integrate those things, but I think it'd be really important if we can give good jobs to the local residents and help sustain that to make those houses affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Manuel.
Yeah, I have a question about, is there any articulation of this with the offset program? Because there's an urban forestry protocol under which offsets can be used, and AB 398 has the previous rounds of cap and trade had a significant use of offsets. I think it was 70, we did a research study on this that was just published, 75% of them were out of state. And in a lot of projects that did not have very good benefits for Californians. So there's a mandate now that half of them be in California, and they have explicit requirements for direct environmental benefits, particularly for disadvantaged communities. And there's a search for the right kind of offsets that could occur in California. And urban forestry is a protocol under the offsets program, as far as I know. And I would prefer it to be sopping up every offset out there, since I think we shouldn't really have offsets, but if we're going to have them, they should be directly benefiting California and the kinds of communities that are targeted by your program. And it's a source of funding.
Thank you. That isn't included in the plan, but as my task force members mentioned, it is a living document, so we're open to that, and I would love to take a look at the report. Thank you.
I think CAL FIRE has been taking a look at that. That's part of what we've talked about, so that it should be pretty straightforward to include the protocol.
Great.
And I think including it would make it just clearer that that's something we're going to chase and it's a priority.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 9, transformative climate communities. Saharnaz, yeah.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Saharnaz Mirzazad. I'm soft-speaking overall. Is it better?
No better.
Okay. My name is Saharnaz Mirzazad. I'm Transformative Climate Communities Program Manager. I'm here to present the change has been made to Transformative Climate Communities Program guidelines. Before starting, I want to thank my colleagues both at Strategic Growth Council and Department of Conservation for many hours that they put to update the guidelines. Next slide, please. I'll provide a program timeline first. Our first draft was released on June 12th. We had a public comment period until June 29th, and we incorporated the proposed change to the guidelines, and we posted it on July 20th. We hope to have the guidelines be adopted today, and we are hoping to release the notice of funding availability in early August. The deadline for submission of the proposal would be end of October, and the review will be during the November 2018, and during the December, we hope to come back to the council for the award, to announce the award of award recipients. Next. Before starting to jump in what are the change that has been made to the guidelines, I want to give you an overview of the goals that we had with updating the guidelines. First, we heard loud from you that we don't want to change the guidelines too much to encourage the previous applicants to reapply for the Transform the Climate Communities Program Awards. With that in mind, we basically focused on the things, the shortcomings that we had in the previous round of guidelines to make sure that we address them for the second round. We streamlined the requirements of the different project types. I'll go through that in more details, and also providing more clarity on administrative process and requirements of our program. We had a stakeholder input process. Our public workshops were in Oakland and Southgate. We had one webinar. We received 17 written comments and 64 attendees in 2 workshops and a webinar. Next slide. There were major concerns that we received from our stakeholders that I would like to go over them first before presenting the final change that has been made to the guidelines. The first concern was related to our DAC requirements. I would like to remind you that in the previous round of guidelines, we had 5% DAC requirements for our implementation grant and 25% for our planning grants. We have received more than probably 12 comments that we need to increase the DAC requirements to include 10, 15, or 25% DAC communities. We think that we have enough in the pipeline from the 5% DAC communities to not open up the implementation grant for this round, but we intend to do that for the next round, not for round 2, but round 3. The other concern was eligibility of unincorporated areas. Our guidelines, the first round and the second round that we're presenting, we are not including unincorporated areas. Although we recognize that there are legitimate concerns around it, that we think that especially in the LA County, we have communities that qualify and should receive the TCC grant. But we didn't feel as a staff that we are still in place to open it up to unincorporated areas for a couple of reasons. Because of the variety of the unincorporated areas that exist in the state of California, from unincorporated islands, from the fringe communities, legacy communities, and we think that we need to have some parameters around what should be included in the unincorporated area inclusion for the first round. So we want to have a task force around this to examine and make sure that when we are coming against council, we are confident that we will not encourage development, the suburban type development in the state, and will be aligned with the state planning priorities. So we didn't include this in our updated guidelines as well, but we have it in our pipeline to address it for the next round of the guidelines update. Planning grants eligibility, when we first put up the first draft, we made that a little bit narrow to focus on the 5% and be more aligned with the implementation grants. But when we received the comments, we noticed that it's better to still keep the 25% and open it up to a 25% community to make sure that we have enough of these communities in our pipeline when we relax our DAC requirements in round 3. The other major area of concern was related to the supporting of previous applicants. We have received multiple suggestions, but the main thing that it comes down to is making sure that they receive enough TA support from our program that will help them in reapplying for our program. I will go over the changes that we have made in our TA process in depth, but that will be the main support that they will get from our program. We also think that these previous applicants are really well positioned this year for multiple reasons, including that we have changed the requirements for the GHG quantification this year. There are 50% minimum requirements, but because the bar was high for them last year to be 100%, they will be more competitive could be more competitive in the application. They also presented a good amount of community engagement. Also, we think that it will make them more competitive for the next round. So those are some points that came up and major concern. There were some smaller concerns and not major concerns that we were able to incorporate into the guidelines that are reflected already in the version that is presented to you. Next slide please. The major proposed changes to our implementation grants, these are not in order, it's more of like a magnitude of change that they had into the guidelines. We have updated our program framework. We have added a new transformative requirement. We have updated the fundable project elements and required minimum for quantifiable projects. We also streamlined the requirements for indicator tracking plan. Next slide. Just to refresh your mind, last year we had these 3 objectives that are objectives of program coming from the legislators. But instead of vision, we had like goals, and we asked the applicants to define goals relative to each of these objectives. When we were evaluating our programs, we noticed that this resulted in a disintegration and not thinking cohesively about the program and projects that they put forward. So this year we are moving to asking them to provide a vision related to this, each of these objectives, instead of like having goals relative to each of those, and with an eye toward integration of the projects and being more integrated. This is one of the major areas of the change in our program. Next slide. Last year during the application process, we received many comments that applicants wanted to include the workforce development activities in their application, and there was a lot of comments that is very important for transformation and area. We heard that, and the applicants were allowed to include the workforce development activities in the last year application. This year, this is actually one of the transformative requirements, and we are asking all applicants to include it, and we allow them to budget up to 5% of the total budget to activities related to the workforce development. Fundable project elements. This is probably the most major change to the guidelines. Just to refresh your mind, last year, Transformative Climate Communities projects were a collection of different CCI programs. It caused a lot of problems during the application process and also during when we went through the pre-contract consultation phase. These programs were adopted from different agencies, and they contradict each other from the requirements. They were not aligned. So we decided that probably the most important change to our guideline is to streamline this, what is fundable under TCC program. The way that we did it, we looked into strategies, TCC strategies, and identified the projects that falls under each strategies. First of all, we noticed that we are missing any project under, like, significant project under water efficiency and health and well-being strategies. With help of our colleagues at water boards and CDPH, we designed and introduced new projects that are fundable under these strategies. We also work with ARB to define which of these elements under the TCC program are quantifiable, and clear that out through our Appendix D to make sure that our applicants know about the quantifiable elements. And because there were unquantifiable elements in this Appendix D, like any other CCI program, we want the applicants to have 50% of their projects to be quantifiable using Air Resource Board quantification methodologies. We also streamline our eligible and ineligible costs and readiness requirements to make sure that we are holding all the projects at the same level, and there isn't any contradictions in the requirements of these different projects that we are asking applicants to put forward. Next slide. This is an example. Actually, you need to click a couple times. No. Okay. Yeah, okay. So this is an example. The strategy is like transit access and mobility strategy. If you look under different categories, you can see that there's like the applicants can submit a construction of new pedestrian facility. And the new walkway that improve mobility access of pedestrian is a quantifiable element per ARB quantification methodologies. The applicants are also eligible to ask for street crossing enhancement, including accessible pedestrian signals, along with this new pedestrian way, but that element will not be quantifiable, but is still fundable under TCC elements. And we think that this is a very important flexibility that we provide to our applicants because the projects can vary and the needs of the places are different. The next major change is the indicator tracking plan. Next slide, please. Last year, we asked our applicants to submit an indicator tracking plan as a part of the transformative requirements. We worked with UCLA and UC Berkeley to clarify what is really that we want to track for transformative climate communities' impact. And through this program and working with Air Resources Board, we are in the process of finalizing indicators that we want to track for TCC, and we would like to provide those to our grantees to track, and it will be like similar across all the sites. We also have made an estimate on the budget how much it will cost for our applicants to track these indicators, and we ask our applicants to budget for 3% of their budget to for the tracking and measuring activities. From that 3%, 1% will go to the grantees to support the evaluators, and on SGC side, we will have an RFI soon to develop a list of qualified entities that can support the grantees in the tracking, because it can be a really huge lift for them if they don't get help. We have also some minor proposed change. So we have made some changes to the collaborative stakeholder structure. We asked the applicants to add a procedure to have a public members on their collaborative stakeholder structure, and procedures to solve disputes, or adding a member or removing a member from the collaborative stakeholder structures. We had made changes to support of public agencies. We asked the applicants, if the public agency is the lead applicant, we are requiring them to submit a resolution. If it's a co-applicant, we need a support letter from the public agency. We have also streamlined the requirements for the capacity to implementation. Previously, we had them both together for the public agencies and nonprofits. Now we have different set of requirements for each of those entities. Consistency with existing local land use plans. Last year we had different requirements, and during the review process we figured out that this is very challenging for us to actually check those. So now we are asking the applicants to give us a letter from their planning and public works departments, local public works department, that these are consistent with the proposed plans, are consistent with their local land use plans. High-speed rail connectivity has been changed. Just a note that this is only applicable to the cities that have high-speed rail. They're not like high-speed rail cities are not getting any extra point. But if they have a high-speed rail station, the applicant should provide a clear vision how these communities will be connected to the high-speed rail station by active transportation or transit. We have also improved our climate adaptation and resiliency section to provide more resources to our applicants, and also the process. Scoring criteria has been updated to reflect the changes that we suggested. We also added one category to be able to give our reviewers the opportunity to look into the projects in more detail. We didn't have that as scoring criteria before. Now the quality of the projects that have been submitted will be reviewed by our reviewers. And a lot of changes to grant administration, and it's more like from the clarity standpoint. We didn't have the process in place last year. Like we have clarified what are the pre-construction costs that are eligible, what are the prevailing wage requirement, and many other things that were a point of confusion for our applicants first round. In the planning grants, there hasn't been any substantial change. We have removed the SGC Sustainable Communities objectives, and we asked the applicants to have minimum of 2 partners with the encouragement of additional partners.
In the technical assistant piece, the applicants will be able to get assistance in GHG quantification, direct application assistance, financial analysis and budget development, project identification, integration, assessment of project, and the GIS. Previous TCC applicants will have a targeted TA this round. We will help them to adapt to the new format of application. Last year we had used the Excel format, which wasn't very user-friendly. We are changing that to fillable PDFs this year, basically supporting them during this process. It won't be a major, but they will have that. Also, generally, the TA structure is changing. They will have any applicants will have one designated person from the TA that will support them during the application. We asked the entities who will provide the GHG quantification to provide examples and a manual to the applicants so they will understand roughly if they have one electric bus, what the impact of it on the GHG reduction, 100 trees, 1 mile of bike lane. So they can have a point of comparison in between to know how their proposed project will impact their overall GHG emission reduction. And with that, I would like to ask the council to adopt our final draft of program guidelines, and I'm happy to answer any question that you might have.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Questions from the council? Brian.
Yeah, I had a question on the tracking. You mentioned that there would be the folks that would be helping would be pre-qualified. Can you explain how that's going to happen?
We will have an RFI out in the next 2 months to develop a list of qualified entities. It can be universities, consultant, but we want to make sure that they can handle the reporting requirements that we have and also help the applicants in data analysis and reporting.
And then there was a percentage of 3% that was the limitation on tracking afterwards.
Minimum.
How did we come up with the 3% number?
We have been
that seems like
working-
a low number if you have a small grant.
We sit down with our UCLA and UC Berkeley partners who help us for coming up with the indicators that we want to track for TCC. And based on our calculation, if our awards is between $25 million to $35 million, $150,000 per year will be the minimum requirements for tracking. And we think that minimum of $50,000 should go to the applicants and the grantees themselves to be able to support the subcontractor that they will have to support them. So that's how we come up with the 3%.
Yep.
For 5 years.
Matt.
At the April meeting, when we were discussing the TCC, there were 3 specific requests from the council related to this particular item. One was to ensure that we could provide technical assistance for applicants for funds. And you've talked about that. How much funding do we have for the technical assistance?
$150,000.
$150,000. How do we does everybody use the same technical assistance, or do you have differences? And if there are different advisors, how do we make sure they're giving the same advice?
We have one TA provider. Last year it was ELP, and actually this year it's again ELP. And they are the lead provider, and they come up with their partners. And basically, last year we had 2 phases, concept phase and the full application phase. This year we don't have that, which is a really good thing. So they can focus their resources better. Mm-hmm. But I can't really speak how it worked out last year. I wasn't here to know the full details of it, but based on what we have received comments from our last year's applicants, we know that there was serious issues with how this was delivered. So this year we are restructuring that to make sure that everybody has adequate point of contact, they have enough resources, and they know how this will work out at the end. From the GHG quantification piece, on top of what we are providing as a manual, they also have the opportunity toward mid-October to give the TA providers what their set of the project is and give and ask for an initial GHG quantification to know where do they stand and how, if they want to improve it, how they can improve it. But the final GHG will be calculated after submission of the grant.
Okay. So the bottom line is we're going to exercise more oversight over the assistance this year
Correct.
to make sure that there's consistency in the assistance that's provided.
Correct.
The two other things that we asked for was one, a streamlined application process for those entities that had applied before. You touched on that a little bit. Could you go over a little bit how you're responding to that request from the council?
Sure. One major thing, as I mentioned, when we were updating the guidelines, we more focused on like what are the necessary changes to provide clarity versus what we are changing in the actual application materials. So we are not changing that much things that we think that they will be able to recycle many of the things that they had last year to basically fill out the fillable PDFs versus Excel. But there are some things that we think that they need to focus on, like probably we were not clear enough on the prevailing wage requirements. So those are the things that will help the applicants to better understand how it impacts their budgeting, if any. Like this will, the things TA will be able to help them to better understand.
Well, it was not a question just of understanding, but it was just the work and the money that went into preparing the application. And so what we were trying to do was reduce the amount of work that those groups who wanted to reapply would have to do in order to get an application in. And so that's the question that I'm asking. How is this, having technical assistance will help, but is there something that will reduce the amount of work, or can they submit the previous application and update it with additional information to just show what's happened during that period since the last application?
It's not the way that we have designed it. We have updated the program, and this is a competitive process. We try really to help and handhold them to resubmit, but honestly, we don't think that it will be a huge work on their end.
But in fact, much of what they submitted last year, even they can take it from the Excel format, put it into PDF, and it will, most of the requirements are the same.
Correct.
Okay.
We haven't changed many of the requirements.
Okay.
It's more of a streamlining.
Then let me just ask you to make that a priority, because we don't want them to have to do an awful lot to recreate the wheel. I would have preferred something a little bit more direct. On the other hand, I also want to get these guidelines out. So we'll be depending on you to work with the applicants to make sure that there's not unnecessary duplication, because the applications are very complex, and it's costly for the groups that are putting together these applications to put the information together and submit it.
Sure.
And that does go to the last point, and the last thing that we asked for last time was consideration of giving additional points, or consideration to the fact that an application had been provided before. And so the question is that reflected in here? Now, I'd like to know if there's a staff recommendation or something on how to respond to that particular requirement.
Do you want to speak to that, Luis?
Yeah, well, we definitely heard that feedback, and I think we were in the guidelines that are included in the binder, identified a few places where we could strengthen or expand on the language that does reflect that sustained engagement with the community. And one of those would be on page 26 of the draft guidelines, under the community engagement plan points section, and that's the score. So this is the scoring criteria. Adding some additional language that reflects that the sustained engagement that would come from doing a TCC application or another type of transformative planning effort. And so we had some ideas. So one was to add under number 2, under community engagement plan at the bottom of page 26, there is residents and key stakeholders were involved in the development and selection of projects included in the proposal. There's a letter, A under there that is indicators included. And we felt that we could add a B under that section
another item that says, describe any long-term sustained community engagement activities used to support community transformation. And so to give communities an opportunity to describe that sustained engagement that has taken place. Again, through something like a TCC application process, application to another funding process, or a comprehensive planning initiative. And then further, to just strengthen it a bit more as well, on page 28, under section 3 of the scoring criteria, capacity to implement, there's one for a collaborative stakeholder structure, kind of in the middle of the page. Number 1 under that talks about characteristics and the work history of the lead applicant and co-applicant. And so we were considering the addition of language that says lead applicant and co-applicants have established work history, sustained community engagement, and or experience working with one or more of the following areas. Disadvantaged communities, housing and community development, economic development, environmental, and public health issues. So in that case, just adding this sustained community engagement as a characteristic of the work history and the partnership of the applicant and co-applicant.
Okay. So is that a proposed change by the staff, or is that a change you would like to, those changes, would you like to see the council suggest those?
We could propose those.
Okay, okay. I'll have some other questions, but let me stop right there and let other council members ask questions.
So I'm glad Matt went first, because I would have said much of the same things. I can add a few other things. In terms of the language that you're suggesting, the one thing I might suggest changing about it, there are many different kinds of community transformation. This is about transformative climate communities, and in neither of the suggestions that you're providing right now is the word climate in there. Mm-hmm. And perhaps if it was sustained community engagement activities to support community transformation around climate issues, mm-hmm. And if in the second change you propose, which I believe is just add sustained community engagement around climate, mm-hmm. so that it's a much clearer note, because there are many different kinds of community engagement and community transformation, many of which are good, but I think we're looking for evidence here of engagement around climate. So I would suggest those changes, and I've got a few other, one comment, which I could kind of probably try to pretend was a question, but I'll just make the comment and then a few actual questions. I too want to get these guidelines out so we can get the proposals in. If I wasn't in such a rush about that, I'd be raising a lot more about unincorporated communities. Because I think that when you've been thinking about them, you've been thinking about small communities that are not densely populated, difficult to perhaps figure out where the climate or GHG gains are going to be. But half of East Los Angeles is unincorporated county territory. And East LA and Belvedere, right next to Boyle Heights and Lincoln Heights, are indistinguishable in terms of their density, the nature of the environmental distress in those communities. And recently, the County of LA has, for the unincorporated county territories, made a few successful applications for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities grants. And the there's a bunch of other unincorporated county territories. For example, one of the TCC proposals last year from South Los Angeles, if it had been able to include some of the unincorporated county territory right next to the city of LA, it would have been more competitive in terms of its population and in terms of who would have been using the trail that they were proposing. So, and the County of Los Angeles has, and I know this because we're doing it for them, launched a project to come up with basically a CalEnviroScreen for the unincorporated county territories, and they've been doing green zones and ground truthing with community-based organizations. So saying that the unincorporated counties territories can't participate in this program is not something that's going to happen in this round. I understand that. But it is, the task force you're talking about, I think this is very important. There's very good arguments. And I think the issue you're perhaps trying to get to about where could you really get GHG gains, the use of unincorporated territories is a very blunt instrument and the wrong one for that. So that's just a point.
Of course,
And I have
there's
a few
some
questions.
tension between that and the previous applicants. So this is, and it's also staff time and the amount of work that it does to do one of these applications is enormous. So if we overburden it now with, $40 million in this budget, I wonder if that's a good...
I am not suggesting that the change happens now.
Okay.
I started by saying
I missed that.
That I am as eager as anyone else to get these guidelines out and interested in minor tweaks that would get them out. But I think in terms of moving forward, the blanket elimination of unincorporated territories is antithetical to the purpose of the program.
We totally agree with you. And actually, when we received this comment, we were seriously considering to include unincorporated areas. And LA County is a perfect example of why it should be. But when we looked into the statewide and do a little bit of analysis, we noticed this is we don't have enough knowledge to put checks in place to include unincorporated area this round. We need some more serious analysis to make sure that we have some parameters around what type of unincorporated communities can apply for TCC, just to avoid any unintended consequence of it. But we will have that in place. We reached out to a couple of our environmental justice friends to document the communities that they think that would be a good candidates. Not only in the LA County, they had an example of the Kern County communities that could apply. So we have that in our pipeline of work this year to make it happen next year.
Yeah, I believe there's some in the Bay Area as well. I just know the geography of Los Angeles better. So here's a couple of questions that have to do with the community engagement side of things. And I'll just ask them all and then you can kind of respond. You seem to have in the guidelines picked up on, and maybe it was there before too, but a pretty good suggestion by California Environmental Justice Alliance about distinguishing between inform, engage, and ensure. But it didn't seem like, seems to me like the engage and ensure are a higher level of activity than inform, and the guidelines list all these different activities you can do, but don't say we really want to see engage and ensure rather than just provide information to people. So for example, in the engage, there's the discussion of participatory budgeting, which you put in. That may not happen in every instance, but it would be more encouraged if we were encouraging people to go beyond inform to engage and ensure in the activities that are there. I'll just ask all these, that way they can respond. Second, there was a suggestion from SEA as well about expanding the cap on the potential spending on community engagement. It seemed like a pretty reasonable suggestion to go from the 5 to 8% to a cap of 10% rather than having to make a special justification. Wondering why that was not, might have been considered why it was not done. And the other comments I'd make about community engagement are about this sustained engagement and the kinds of changes that you'd be making with regard to people who made applications in the previous round.
Sure. We do some math in the beginning, although this 5 to 8% is what council agreed upon last year. It hasn't changed. It's one of the areas that we didn't change. But just give you an example, we have 5 to 8% the community engagement, 5% workforce development. We have 5% pre-development costs. And when you add these things, we easily get 50% on the projects that need to have a quantifiable GHG emission. The room that we're talking about is very small, so we want to have some flexibility to add innovation and also make sure that we are not basically dictating what you have to budget for. So that was one of the things that we felt probably it's good just to stick with what we had last year. But definitely if the council feels that we need to change that, we are open to that discussion. But we didn't come with a recommendation to change the community engagement piece, change the cap.
And on the first point about the sort of ranking of participatory engagement activities?
Definitely, I think actually we can reflect that in our evaluation process.
I would very much encourage that.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, anybody want to suggest how we might handle, there's been a number of suggestions, some of which staff seems quite open to. How should we create a motion here? Anybody want to make a suggestion?
Have any public comment yet?
We haven't, but I'd like to get the motion out so that the comment follows the public comment.
It seems like the two, or maybe I guess it's three actionable things, are the two tweaks in language that was being suggested by Louise. Maybe she could read them back with the climate words in there. And then the other might be about directing the staff to take into account the inform versus engage and insure. Those seem like the ones that are actionable and what actually could be done today and move the process forward.
Just to clarify, we already have that in our evaluation, so we already considered that.
Okay.
To the inform and insure point?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, okay.
It was a letter that came from SEHA, if I'm not wrong, so that's where
And where is that in the document?
So we have another piece for the evaluation that we hand to the evaluators and the application.
Okay, so it's, okay, great. So there's only then
Yeah.
the two places that Louise was suggesting might address the concerns that Matt and I raised.
Would you like me to
Yeah, go
read
ahead
those back?
and read that with the idea that this is an amendment to the staff proposal for purposes of, hopefully somebody proposes a motion.
So the first would be actually at the bottom of page 26 of the draft guidelines, carrying over to the top of page 27, under the criteria community engagement plan. In item 2, we would add a B that would read, describe any long-term sustained community engagement activities to support community transformation around climate change, or climate issues. And the second would be on page 28, right in the middle of the page, under criteria collaborative stakeholder structure, with item number 1. That would be amended to read, lead applicant and co-applicants have established work history, sustained in community engagement around climate change and/or experience working with one or more of the following areas: disadvantaged communities, housing and community development, economic development, environmental and public health issues.
Okay, so I guess I'm looking for a motion on the staff proposal as amended by the provisions presented by Louise.
I'll also move.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Thank you very much. We have some public comment on this item, which we'll get to now, starting with Tiffany Ang, followed by Eni Wang.
Hi, good afternoon. My name again is Tiffany Ng, and I'm with the California Environmental Justice Alliance, or CEJA. First, really want to thank the staff and the council for their openness to hearing our comments and listening to some of our recommendations. It's really great to have this relationship with SGC that really models like really excellent community engagement and outreach on your part. So just want to really emphasize that this is such a great model that we hope that other state departments and agencies follow too. We do want to highlight a couple things in the guidelines. Particularly, we really appreciate the changes to the planning grant requirements, the fact that more disadvantaged communities in the top 25% plus disadvantaged incorporated communities can apply for planning grants. This is going to be a huge boost for a lot of those communities across the state that have good plans in the work, but really just need that extra boost to get their plans to really come to fruition. We also really like, again, the mention of at least participatory budgeting in the beginning as a recommended strategy to be used. Thank you, Mr. Pastor, for recommending like stronger language, but we do at least appreciate that acknowledgement in the guidelines. Also, the mention of more community participation decision-making through a better like nomination process for community members to participate in the stakeholder structures. And the removal of certain high-speed rail requirements that we thought were kind of restrictive. Again, I know this has been talked about a lot, but we do want to really highlight the fact that while we know that disadvantaged incorporated communities might be considered for future implementation grants, we do really think that it's really important to consider a lot of those communities, and especially other disadvantaged communities in the top 25%, that while they can apply for planning grants, are still not able to apply for implementation of the grants in the future. We've talked to many members about this, so I don't want to like beleaguer, but there's communities from Southern Kern, Fresno County, LA County, Eastern Coachella Valley, Bay Area, that are really doing innovative, groundbreaking work, very community-led projects, but they just need to get that extra investment, just like communities in Fresno and LA that also deserve the investment. So just want to make sure that while we move forward with the program, we do consider more communities that need that support, and also thinking about the longevity of the program, the fact that if we were to allow more communities to apply for the program, we can get more support, not only from members of the public, but also from the legislature, who are really responsible for making sure that we continue to keep a higher budget for the program in the future. So just wanted to say, again, thank you for the support and consideration, but we look forward to talking to you further about more inclusion of communities in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Eni, followed by Erica Rincon.
All right, good afternoon. Emmy Wang with the Greenlining Institute. Thank you again to the Strategic Growth Council for the strong guidelines on this program. As co-sponsors of AB 2722, we continue to be excited about the catalytic and transformative potential of this program. However, we think that limiting the eligibility for the implementation grants to the top 5% unfairly limits the pool of eligible communities who could be eligible for TCC implementation, and also threatens the amount of support that we're able to build for the program. So number one, we agree that TCC should go to the most kind of disadvantaged communities in the state. Cal EPA has already determined the top 25% to be that threshold. So we ask SGCD to follow that guidance. Number two, of last year's planning grantees, half are either wholly or partially ineligible for implementation grants under a top 25% designation. Understanding that last year's planning grants won't be applying for implementation grants this year, we still do urge they're undertaking planning activities in their communities to increase their capacity for eligibility for implementation grant in the future. And so for those reasons, we urge that in this year as well as in future years that implementation grant eligibility be opened up to the top 25%. Number three is, I think we're concerned about the amount of kind of community support that we're able to build for the TCC program. We've seen that there's been confusion kind of with communities around who is eligible for this program, who is able to apply, a perception from last year that this program is only for, Fresno and LA, and a top 5% designation, I think, adds to that confusion, and also just really limits the ability of those communities to see this program as for them, as an opportunity for catalytic transformation, which is the exact opposite impression that we need to be making with this program. And then number four is we're also concerned about the ability to build legislative support for the TCC program. As advocates over the past 2 years, we've engaged in budget advocacy to try to ensure that this program has the adequate resources to really make large-scale transformative investments. As we've seen, I think we've all been disappointed by the amount of resources that we've been able to pool for the TCC program. And it's been really challenging year after year in terms of making that budget ask. And so a 5% implementation eligibility cutoff, I think, limits the amount of potential support we could see from legislators whose districts fall outside of that top 5% and who therefore are not able to champion the TCC program in a way that I really think they could if their districts were eligible for implementation grants. So with that, thank you again for another year of strong guidelines. And for this year and future years, we are really urging for increasing the eligibility thresholds. Thank you.
Thank you. Erica, followed by Ana Solario.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. Erica Rincon on behalf of PolicyLink. Want to really thank the staff and the council for your tremendous work on this program and for the extensive public participation process to inform these guidelines, and really appreciate all your work to incorporate a lot of the feedback that you received. I would like to echo a couple comments that were already made around expanding eligibility to unincorporated communities and to other vulnerable communities beyond the top 5% of the Calendar Screen census tracts. Just to say around disadvantaged unincorporated communities, these are places that are already ineligible for a lot of forms of public infrastructure investment. And we have an issue here where we're kind of perpetuating that if we continue to make them ineligible. I want to raise a couple recommendations around workforce development and jobs access. Very much appreciate the focus on this area and the allowance of using 5% of funding for workforce development. We also would recommend that in going forward that you all think about including language that specifies targeted hire for specifically underrepresented workers in California, given that there are groups that continue to be left behind and not provided access to employment, and we know that hiring discrimination is still very real. And then in thinking about the types of indicators that you all will be collecting information on, we also hope that there will be data around who is getting access to the jobs, specifically with demographics in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, income level, et cetera, so that we can fully understand who are the communities that are being left behind and who isn't. And then finally, just wanted to say a point around the anti-displacement language. Really appreciate all the work that's been done there. And then in going forward, we also hope, though, that we could encourage or require applicants that they involve the most impacted folks in determining what types of anti-displacement policies will be implemented. Again, thank you for your time, and we'd be happy to talk more with the council going forward on this program. Thank you.
Thank you. I note, Anna, that you actually wanted to do the general public comment. Yeah, that's fine. Followed by Gracia Lenas.
It's fitting. Thank you. Ana Solorio, CHA, Community Housing Opportunities Corporation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. CHOC is a nonprofit affordable development developer and manager. That means we develop affordable housing. The last 10 years it's been multifamily, but our history has been home ownership also. We also are part of the California Community Builders and the 200. The 200 are 200 advocates for home ownership. So, tough topic. We have a housing crisis. Home ownership is a very complex issue, difficult issue, not easily resolved. But, journey of 1,000 miles, million miles starts with one step. So the 200 are committed to home ownership. Last year we had a series of conferences in Sacramento, San Jose, Fresno, LA. We sponsored a governor's debate last year for the primaries. We're also this year committed to a series of student teach-ins at the University and Cal State, focusing on housing and environmental justice. So hence our names, M&Ms, minorities and millennials, and students. So that's our acronym. So the relationship between affordable housing and reduction of greenhouse gas. So when you, as was spoken to earlier today, when you reduce your reliance on automobiles that burn fossil fuel, you reduce your greenhouse gas production. One of the our groups strongly advocate are TODs, transit-oriented developments, where you look at infill, you build around existing transit centers, whether it be in the inner city or in more rural areas, as long as there's a transit line. So how does affordable housing is a complex issue. It relies in California on multiple funding sources, multiple lines of money, and you have to integrate it. But one of the things that you always have to start with, whether you do any development, is a pre-development assessment. You call it a feasibility, we call it development funds. Those are either loans or grants that are incorporated into the final pricing out of your structure that you build. So I would like to encourage you to entertain this as an idea. We'd like to talk to staff further about this issue of how we can increase home ownership. Transforms people's lives, it reduces poverty, the health outcomes and the educational attainment outcomes when someone owns versus rental is dramatic. I think that when you talk about development funds, you can talk about very small amounts of money that make a project feasible. Because there are complex issues around infill. If you know what you're doing, you could probably do it do an assessment from anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000. You can assess whether a project is feasible. So we'd like to at least make that proposal, and we'd like to have some ongoing discussions about sort of the critical issues of our housing crisis coupled with our need to safeguard our environment. So thank you for allowing me time to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracia, followed by Richard Sandowski.
Good afternoon again, Council. Gracia Lanes with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. So I think I'm going to echo a lot of our thoughts that some of our previous partners shared with Policy Link, CEJA, and Greenlining. Just first of all, obviously thanking, the Strategic Growth Council, the staff, and all of the council members for, meeting with us and making the time to meet with us. It's been a crazy time, I'm sure, for the staff as they've been in transition from Randall to Dr. Bedsworth, and with Daniela also transitioning into maternity leave currently. I'm sure it's been very crazy, and we appreciate the commitment that they've given to the guidelines and this program itself. So thank you for that, and thank you as well for some of the changes that we've seen. I think we're moving in the very much a positive direction, in particular with the planning grants, opening it up to how it was previously. Allows for those severely disadvantaged communities that might not be captured by the calendar screen, or if they are, it's a little bit harder. So we're very appreciative of that. And we're hoping that some of the communities that we work with across the San Joaquin Valley and the Eastern Coachella Valley will be applying for those. So we'll be keep an eye out for those. And additionally, we're also supportive of some of the amendments that were made by the council into the changes, and would like to recommend a couple more, one of which is to add language that specifies that communities should be involved in the process of identifying the displacement avoidance policies. Although it's more or less kind of, one could say it's meant to be there in the collaborative stakeholder structure and how that's written, we would like it to be much more specific or explicit, I guess I should say, that communities should be involved in that process and identifying those displacements, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to know what works for them, both in the residential aspect and also the small business aspect. And the other comment, that we're going to make is, echoing our previous thoughts around opening the implementation grants outside of the top 5% and outside of the incorporated. When I think of these communities, I think of one specific community that falls in Fresno County. It's Calwa community. Some of you, I'm sure, might have heard of it. It falls technically in the city of Fresno. It's a small little community that's surrounded entirely by city. Part of it is already incorporated into the city. Part of it is not, but it's in Southeast Fresno. So, this community is very much thriving. They're currently in the process of finalizing their specific plan, and they could be a very competitive application in this upcoming round. And excluding that one community, Calwa, would be I mean, like a slap to the face to them. They're just like, they wouldn't understand the fact that why aren't we part of this? We're part of this community, but just because we're technically, not legally identified as an incorporated part of the city, it excludes them. So we hope that we can make that change because it's not just Fresno, as Dr. Pastor made his argument there that, it's found in LA, it's found in Fresno. I'm sure there's dozens more counties where you'll find these unincorporated communities that are, just surrounded by city, and just for one reason or another, we're not incorporated. So thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Thank you. I'll integrate my comments at public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Comments from council members. Matt.
Well, a couple of things. One, I appreciate the staff and the changes recommended by staff, so I did want to make that clear. For future reference, some of the things we might look at, I think, have been mentioned by some of the speakers and some of the comments that we received today. I think we do need to take a look at opening this up so we can look at projects in unincorporated areas. That makes sense to me. I think we might look at looking beyond the 5%, though I am mindful of the fact that we've got a very limited number of programs that we can fund, which brings up another issue that I'll get to in just a second. But, I think it is worth exploring whether we want to open it up a little bit wider than it has been at this point. I am glad, and I hope that people understand that we are trying to respond to these issues as they come up. So the workforce development issue is a good example of the fact that as we hear about new issues, we're willing to take those on and take a look at them. So we appreciate the comments, and I hope that individuals appreciate the fact that we'll look at them as well. So I think one of the things we need to look at is really making sure the workforce program works here. I'd also like us to take a look at, once we go through and we've made an emphasis and put an emphasis on sustained community and engagement, how do we make sure that there's sustained community engagement after the funding is approved? So that's one of the things that we should be looking at, I think, as we do grants or issue funds. How do we make sure that that relationship that was influential to us as we looked at whether to grant funds is really going to continue, and that once the money is obtained by the locale, they sort of forget the community engagement part, because we do need to make sure that the communities continue to be engaged in the process. And then the other thing I just mentioned is if there's a couple of the speakers mentioned our resource constraints, and it would be nice if we could figure out some way to bring some more resources into this program. And so I'd encourage the staff and the chair and members of the council to think about whether there are ways that we can do that, because I think it can be a very, very good program. I think that at some point we are going to need to grow beyond the impression that it's Fresno and LA and nowhere else. But in order to do that, we're just going to need funding. So I'd encourage us to think about where we might find that additional funding.
Okay. Other comments? Manuel.
So I want to echo, I appreciate the back and forth and the way this process iterates along with the council and the staff responding and community also responding and critiquing in very productive ways. It seems like two things came up for me in the conversation. One, I think for future research along with the unincorporated issue is if the threshold was drawn at 10%, how wide does it get? And would that allow us to get a little more geographic diversity and still reach communities? Because I do think for some of the applicants, there's been a little bit of trying to shoehorn and then leaving out a pretty needy community that doesn't quite meet the threshold. So I think that'd be useful to take a look at. And I also think, and it was mentioned with regard to the evaluation directions you're giving, that there was a very good suggestion about whether or not communities were engaged in discussing the policies, such as the anti-displacement policies. And so looking for evidence of whether they were not just presented with, here's the vision, but were they actually engaged in the discussion of policies and mitigations, would be good in the evaluation process.
Other comments? I have a couple of very quick comments. The planning grants, as has been noted, go to potentially top 25%. And the idea of that, I hope everybody recognizes, is to build the program with the idea that it will, over time, be expanded. But I also want everybody, hopefully, to recognize how much work it is for staff to go through and work with the full application. It's a lot of work for the local community. It's a huge amount of work for the TA process, and for staff, it is huge. Doing 3 of them, and then there were 4, we had a bifurcated process last year, which we're truncating, I think for good reason. The amount of work that a very dedicated but modest staff has to do with each applicant should not be underestimated. So we have to be a little bit careful, I think, in opening this up too far, and I really appreciate, Manuel, your suggestion that we look at what the reach of, what, 10% or 15%, what does that do? Because, you know, we need to do this stepwise. I guess you may be here, I probably won't, but as we go forward, we'll, you know, I think we need to do it with some care. So, all right, with that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the guidelines as modified by Louise's language is adopted. Thank you. All right, we have a couple of closing general public comments, starting with Terilyn Gray, and followed by Marla Jo Sadowski.
Thank you, Chair Alex and council members. My name is Terilyn Gray. I am Chief Executive Officer of the Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce. And actually, sir, I had 2 comments. I had one comment regarding the TCC guidelines. As I went through them, I could see that many of the changes were driven by our grant application experience and participatory budget process that we had in Fresno last year. We have not yet been able to start our implementation work, and it's my hope, I just want to echo what you just said. It is a capital intensive application process, very, very, very difficult. And for small nonprofits that were lucky enough, like we were, to participate in it just, I can't underscore enough how difficult it was. So streamlining the process is to be applauded. And I would just encourage you all to, as you streamline, to still leave enough room for the innovation and creativity of applicants in the guidelines as they are revised and adopted moving forward. My second comment is in regards to the racial equity study as a part of the HIAP discussed earlier. Chair Alex, you asked a question: how does the report possibly impact the work that SGC does? I submit, sir, that the impact could be substantial. It could change the landscape of DBE business participation in contracting, and specifically transportation-related projects funded by the state of California. Currently, there are 0.5% of Caltrans contracts let to African-American contractors and 0 in my Central Valley region. Equitable grant making by SGC has secondary and tertiary effects on the DBE business community. When DBE community organizations such as mine are grant recipients, DBE utilization organically increases, as those DBEs are the businesses that get the contracts to complete the work of the grant. Our TCC grant is expected to generate more than 22 jobs, and a high percentage of those jobs will go to disadvantaged businesses and individuals. I would encourage the council to engage ethnic chambers like mine in the dialogue and problem solving around the findings of your report. Our communities are often studied intensely, but not engaged in solution making or empowered to execute new strategies and programs. Despite much input from ethnic community leaders, Caltrans recently made the decision to give all 3 of its DBE outreach and education contracts to Humboldt State. So there's little to no hope that the situation will improve in that agency in the coming years. My point is this: the tactical fight to create pathways out of poverty is on the ground, and those of us doing the work to improve the lives of disadvantaged individuals and communities need you to put the money under your control directly into the fight and create more jobs closer to the ground and utilize DBE community leaders and organizations in the process. Without this, it's impossible to advance a healthy and equitable future for transportation in California. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share my comments.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I think Kate will chat with you after.
Oh,
If you, yeah.
If you have a minute. Okay. Marla Jo Sandowski. And Richard, do you want to speak again, or you? Okay.
Dueling microphones here. That's pretty funny. I'm Marla Jo Sadowski, and I'm representing Homefront. We're a new organization. Our home base is Homefront Morro Bay, and we're interested in the environmental justice policy, guidance, and implementation. This is our first meeting to your chambers here. And I just wanted to make an introduction. We have some situation, our goal is to take the environmental justice policy engagement and into local communities, so that we would, break up into community by community and engage the public in the problems facing us with the climate changes that we're about to come. And we're also interested in, particularly not, in Morro Bay, what we see is that opportunists coming in and taking advantage of, say, sea level rise, the flag words, the green words, and not really, proposing projects that aren't duly addressing greenhouse gas emissions, like picking one thing that they say they're going to correct, and then the way they propose doing it makes more problems. So we're interested in informing communities and public of what the whole scenario is, so that we can have more public engagement and more say in planning strategic growth. We have a situation with the housing in our community. By the way, my house just burnt on Saturday in the thing, so I'm really, they're gone, but CAL FIRE saved my house. I was glad to see them here. But I don't know. I almost didn't make it here, so I'm not prepared. But I want to tell you, this is really important to a lot of people, the work you're doing. And thank you for being here, and we'll check in with you later.
Thank you for being here as well. Richard.
Yeah, I just want to follow up what my wife was saying. Part of the in Morro Bay, I'm a mechanical engineer by profession and a wastewater collection professional. And one of the things that I would like to see in a holistic point, when we look at frameworks like greenhouse gas reductions, public health and environment, and economic opportunity, integrating those together with the local knowledge and local workforce, For example, in our community, in November of 2006, all our residents were given highly nitrated water. Later on, we found out we have sewage in the water. One of the things that we would like to see is sometimes we don't have the local political will, so we rely on the state maybe to come in and oversight and maybe really take a look at the science behind the issue and then address it. And for example, like as a collection system operator, to me, one of the easiest things to do is, as we know, we live in an earthquake country, and especially on the coast, we have liquefaction issues. And in fact, in 2003, during the San Simeon earthquake, I was involved in getting some FEMA funding for liquefaction damage in a nearby community. Looking at infrastructure, because you don't really think about sewer lines, but you're looking at that as we look at the coastline, addressing those issues in parallel as we address some of the greenhouse gases. And another issue that we could look at from a broader standpoint is like communities that are on state water in helping restore their aquifers, getting off state water, and what kind of a huge benefit that is, and having not to pump state water all over the place, which is a huge energy source. And once again, I would like to just repeat what my wife said. We so appreciate you guys for being here and addressing and putting California on the forefront in climate change and sea level rise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's the last word. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much.